Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm back, you're back, we're all back. Let's go with our usual programming. So, I shot a lot of video clips while I was away. I have a vague idea of what kind of video I want to make with them, but it's going to take a while. So I figured in the meantime, let's talk about some Genshin stuff, and what better to talk about than the kind of team that's actually been surprising me quite a lot because of how fun it is. I am of course talking about DPS Columbina. Columbina already does a fair bit of DPS as an on-fielder. My Columbina, with level 6, level 10, level 9 talents as of writing, is looking at around 31.6k personal DPS in a Ascendant Gleam crystallized team with Noelle, 36k DPS with a Nefer team, and 41.5k personal DPS in a Lunar Charge team. And with the exception of the Nefer team, of course, that already does make Columbina hover around the 30% mark for the team DPS, which is of course very impressive. But what if we were to play Columbina as an on-fielder? What kind of team would really make the most out of her kit? Well, if we take her 3 archetypes into account, let's have a look at what we can do with her on-field. Lunar Charge wouldn't really care about her on-fielding capabilities, with the exception of trying to drive an off-field Pyro DPS. You simply don't need the Hydro app from her normal attacks. Her only source of direct Lunar Charge damage comes from her skill, and that's already working off-field. Lunar Crystallize could justify on-field Columbina. Now, if you pair it with Lunar Charge and have some Geo off-fielders like Zhongli and let's say GMC, Kachina, Albedo, Chiori, well, the Lunar Charge aura only has half unit of Hydro to get reacted with. So adding in 1 unit on a standard ICD from her normal attacks, or even 1 U on no ICD with her charge attacks, can, I think, maintain a stronger Hydro aura. At least on-field Columbina resulted in a bit more Zhongli off-field DPS, which I think includes Lunar Crystallized turret hits compared to off-field Columbina in this team. But once again, Columbina's only source of direct Lunar Crystallized damage comes from her skill, and that's already happening whether you're on-fielding her or not. So you're really just driving again. That brings us to Lunar Bloom, and here we actually have a team that actually has something very interesting to work with, because yes, obviously Columbina's skill will still give us that off-field Lunar Bloom direct damage, but there's also the matter of her charge attack that can also use the Dews to do that direct Lunar Bloom damage. And because of that, I would say DPS Columbina is in fact Lunar Bloom Columbina. There are some gameplay notes to keep in mind with DPS Columbina. Now, if you use her Dews, this charge attack doesn't actually consume stamina. You also don't have to reactivate it all the time. You can just simply permanently hold down your attack button instead. You can, however, use directional buttons to move around after every use of her charge attack. However, you can dash or jump early to cancel the charge attack. When she starts moving her head up, you'll still do the damage. Honestly, I wouldn't really bother with it. I haven't noticed a major DPS increase, and I have a propensity to screw it up, resulting in actually a DPS loss. Columbina, though, sings while she uses her charge attacks. Now, I personally don't mind this at all, but some people seem to really hate it. So if you're like that, you probably want to turn down the game's voice volume all the way off. So what kind of team would we set up for DPS Columbina? Well, let's start off with the ideal scenario, getting Ascendant Gleam. Because of what we build on Columbina, it's essential that at least 2 not-quite characters are in fact on the team. And for a Lunar Bloom team, naturally we want to have someone like Lauma. Now, one thing to note about Lauma is her BloomJin buff stacks. By using her ult, she starts with 18, but with the full use of her own skill, she can get 18 more. Now, over the course of, let's say, an 18-second rotation, which is roughly the duration of her skill plus 1 second, her skill will attack 3 times and hit 5 times, each resulting in 15 hits total. Depending on the rotation and the team, I feel like I can usually fit in about 5 or occasionally 6 charge attacks from Columbina. Sticking with 5 though, when the charge attack actually uses up a Dew, it will hit 3 times, so we are talking about another 15 hits total from that. So naturally we're looking at 30 BloomJin stacks being used by Columbina herself. So I'd say getting Hold Skill Lauma is in fact pretty important. If for some reason you couldn't get that, you'd essentially be losing out on quite a bit of BloomJin damage no matter how you play. For me, it's the difference between 50k hits from her charge attack going right down to 24k hits. Given that, what about the rest of the team? Well, I have Serenade on Lauma, so I would like to bring someone who actually has deep wood, and who better to bring along than Nahida. my Nahida is permanently on Deepwood. I also have a C2. By giving her Favge and a bunch of EM, i.e. with an EM cup, the EM functions as a crit rate buff, so she can battery the team somewhat. No point keeping Kagura's on Nahida for this team, as we're usually not going to be playing around with spread damage. And for the final slot, well, how about Nilou? How about we make this a Nilou team? Having double Hydro means Hydro Resonance, which means more HP for Columbina. The direct Lunar Bloom damage from both her skill and her charge attack are of course also HP scaling. Especially R1 Nilou is very good, where her huge HP can also translate to a team-wide EM buff via the weapon. But as it turns out, Nilou's A1 passive, that we all remember as giving us her Super Blooms, can also give the team an EM increase of plus 100 whenever someone is hit by Dendro cores. This passive is only available, of course, if the team is Dendro and Hydro, which in this case it very much is. And Columbina doesn't turn Bloom Seeds into something else unlike Nefer, so the team can in fact maintain an uptime on that buff. Although I do believe a Nefer Nilou team can do that as well, provided you don't do a specific special kind of rotation. But unlike the Nefer team, we're also going to be leveraging Super Bloom damage. It's not going to be nearly as hard-hitting as the Nilou team with my full EM Candace, but we're still looking at 86k Bloom crits on this team as opposed to over 120k Bloom crits from Candace. And because of that, I'd like to keep Nilou's ring around just for more Hydro weapon, therefore more blooms. But that also means we'd run out of BloomJin stacks a little bit faster before the rotation ends. Thus forms what I would personally call the DPS Columbina team. It's a Nilou team that lets Columbina flourish and do a lot of DPS. And it seems to be, at least for me, one of my strongest teams. Now, the total team DPS is hovering somewhere between 145 to even 150k, with Columbina doing 70% of it since she's actually doing around 104k personal DPS. She is, in fact, really popping off in this team. Oddly enough, against 2 enemies, it seems like this team performs just a smidge better than my Nilou team with Candace. But against 5 enemies that aren't even grouped up all that well, honestly, the Candace team is in fact stronger. I think this is going to be leveraging the fact that DPS Columbina, I think, is single target, but she does seem to have a bit of minor AoE, I guess. So I suppose if the enemies are not too well clumped up, a little bit spread apart, but still able to get full Super Bloom damage, yeah, the Candace variant is in fact going to be quite a fair bit stronger. Either way, this is kind of wild, to be honest. Look, at my level of investment with Columbina, this is what we're looking at. For comparison, my R5 Wolves Gravestone Mawika in the Vape team that I loved playing the most seems to hover around 80 to 90k personal DPS. Let's talk about some team alternatives real quick. If you're missing either Nahida or Nilou, Sucrose is the obvious option. Sucrose has some interesting gameplay to keep in mind. Really pay attention to whether her ult is ready. If it is, you can swap to her earlier to use the ult, as hitting enemies with it keeps the A4 passive active. If it's not, then I'd place her right after Lauma in this rotation so that you can maximize the uptime from her skill, triggering that A4 passive. This is the case whether you're running, for example, VV because you're lazy like me, or if you're running Deepwood on her. The Deepwood buff and the A4 passive both have the same trigger conditions and the duration, actually, so there we go. If Nahida is getting replaced with Sucrose, then you're already losing out on Nilou's own buffs and the Super Bloom DPS, which is in fact a severe team DPS loss because Columbina's DPS also seems to be getting cut in half based on my own testing in the simulacrum. I think the initial rotation will also get pretty scuffed as well, so I really wouldn't recommend this. If it's Nilou who's getting replaced with Sucrose, on the other hand, the team doesn't really suffer that much. Columbina's personal DPS will drop to around 91k, so I think losing Super Blooms pretty much accounts for that. That being said though, if it's Lauma that you're missing, and thus you're thinking of replacing her with Sucrose in this team, well, once again, you can pretty much drop Nilou, as she's no longer going to be doing all that much. And at that point, I'd also swap Nilou for Aino, just so you can have Ascendant Gleam. Okay, that being said though, Jahoda surprisingly works. She can in fact fill up her bottle relatively easily in this kind of team, turns out. The team is nowhere near as strong as what I initially suggested, but that's not to be surprising. There is also C6 Jahoda. You can at least get some crit value for Columbina. It's something to maybe consider. Hey guys, this is Kate the Editor. I forgot to mention that Baizhu is actually a really good alternative to Nahida if you don't have her, because Baizhu, of course being a healer, also means that you may want to actually consider using him if you don't have C1 Lauma, therefore you will have that healing and also like a shield, which can be pretty nice, at least for the interruption resistance. Now, this is a C2 Nahida versus a C1 Baizhu demonstration, both using Favge. As you can see here, the damage difference between the two characters in these teams with regards to Columbina's charge attacks isn't that much different. It's probably around about like a 10% damage loss running Baizhu instead of Nahida, so there we go. And at the end of this, you're going to see that the team DPS is not that different, but it's still of course going to be worse with Baizhu. But Columbina's personal DPS has been going down from about 96k with this particular demonstration of the Nahida team to around about 80k with this particular demonstration of the Baizhu team. So yeah, he's kind of close. Speaking of Jahoda, as far as I can tell, she can't fill up her water bottle with Nahida and Lauma on the team, so I'd say it's not a good idea to bring her instead of Sucrose at this point. You do in fact need to fill up that water bottle if you want to use her C6. So assuming we're playing the Nilou team, let's talk about how we build Columbina. Her signature is of course her best in slot. We're talking about 24% HP, plus 60% lunar crit damage, and also 14 energy. We do love all of that. According to the spreadsheet impactors, the Reliquary of Truth is in fact pretty close. Columbina can use its full passive, but there's 5 seconds of downtime and the EM buff, which might be best kept for setting up the next rotation. Otherwise, if you're a Battle Pass player, Sac Jade is the way to go, but just swap out of Columbina occasionally, for example, to get more Favge particles from Nahida before continuing to maintain that passive. That being said though, with the way we're going to be building Columbina, holy hell, you are going to be overcapping on crit rate like crazy. If you have Ashgrave and Drinking Horn, that'd be the free-to-play option that I'd lean towards. Otherwise, I think Black Marrow Lantern would be stronger than Prototype Amber. I haven't seen any comparisons or calcs on this, and I don't have the time or the energy to go and build a Black Marrow Lantern, so I'm just going to wildly guess based on the fact that the Black Marrow Lantern has some passives that should be really useful for a DPS Columbina in a Bloom team. For artifacts, the Nockride DPS set is the way to go, hence keeping Ascendant Gleam is very important. Until you secure that, I guess you can get away with Gilded Dreams or maybe a 2-piece HP, 2-piece EM build. For stats, HP crit damage is the play, and that's because of how much crit rate we're going to end up having on Columbina. So you really should have a look at how much crit rate you should actually have in the stats page for your Columbina prior to when things kick in. Because Lauma's A1 passive gives plus 10% crit rate to Lunar Bloom damage, and so does Nahida's C2. You're also going to get plus 30% crit rate from, of course, the Nockride DPS set 4-piece bonus, and after her skill hits 3 times, Columbina will also get plus 15% crit rate buff from her A1 passive. Meaning I need Columbina's crit rate before the fight starts to be at 35% if I don't want to overcap. My build is currently at 46%, so I've actually overcapped. So really, if you want to focus on building her for this kind of gameplay, just auto-lock anything that has crit damage, HP, EM, and or ER. Don't even think about getting crit rate at this point. Obviously, if you don't have C2 Nahida, or hell, if you aren't going to keep Ascendant Gleam and therefore you don't have Lauma, you'd ironically have some breathing room with regards to crit rate, and I would actually be somewhat undercapped on the crit rate as a result. With Favge Nahida, I seem to be able to get away barely with around about 125 ER, so you will need to have more ER on your build if you're not going to be using something like her signature. I think that'll do it for this DPS Columbina video. She's oddly enough quite fun in this rather unique role, so I really like that this is something that you can choose to play if you want. It's because DPS Columbina exists that I am feeling less reason to go and get Nefer of all people, for those of us who actually skipped Nefer, but Columbina, of course, as a DPS character in this team is, at least team DPS wise, still doing less overall DPS sometimes than Nefer, especially if I get the EM buff on Witzith, so it's a little bit RNG here and there. But that being said though, look, I probably wouldn't go out of my way to get Nefer if you actually enjoy playing a lot of that DPS Columbina instead. Of course, now that I'm back to making videos, you can't get Columbina right now, so this particularly interesting point of view may be something you might want to think about when either character actually gets a rerun. I think that's going to be a big sticking point, especially with Nefer reruns. Should you get Nefer, or should you just play DPS Columbina instead? Let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. How do you feel about DPS Columbina? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.